You're in for a great episode today on Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa.
And we get into some interesting conversations on the show. Sometimes they're difficult topics. Sometimes there's controversial things said and spoken about. And I'm sure some of it does more than actually trigger and challenge people that are medical professionals. And that's not our goal, but we're a little free from that. We've all had our experiences that show us and sometimes prove by experience that what we were told our whole lives about cancer, about disease, about whatever, may not always be true. This show isn't about medical advice. We don't give medical advice. We're just sharing stories and, personal experiences and letting you, the listener/viewer, decide.
So this week's guest, Dawn Lester, actually has an incredible story, again, from her own personal health challenges, which Isaac and I have both shared very openly on this show about our own health challenges over the years and how they were really huge catalysts for us to change not only the way we were doing things, but in the long run, it really changes your perspective on things because, again, when you're doing things under the mainstream medical model and under a particular paradigm, you never really cure anything. Like you're just kind of going from one thing to the next to the next. And so I really love this conversation with Dawn because we touch on really a lot of the things that we now understand to be the way of true health. So taking personal responsibility, being able to challenge the mainstream narratives and actually start researching things for yourself. I think that's the most important takeaway from this is to really, you can't step out of one paradigm and then just automatically go to another paradigm with the same mindset of like, if I just do whatever someone tells me that I'll be healthy. It's really not about that. So I absolutely love this conversation with Dawn. I think it's going to open a lot of people's minds.
And the medical establishment has been a part of all of our journeys. You have to start somewhere. You don't have to just cut the ties right away and go off into the bush and start trying to put herbs together and cure things. And we understand that not everything is going to work for every person. That's the whole point. The point is to start your own journey, to start looking at things a little bit of a different way. Realize that you have more say-so about your future, about the path that you go on. And this is more of a directed journey, a self-directed journey. So every little bit of information helps, but you can begin questioning things and moving in a different way and thinking in a different way and following your own innate wisdom and getting more in touch with that. That's more about what Natural AF is about.
Yeah, totally. And I've got to say, that was the biggest takeaway I loved from this interview was just getting back in touch with your intuition. And even I need reminders of this. Like I literally studied holistic nutrition, which again is, holistic to a degree. But now I kind of work more in the psycho-spiritual world with Psych K and looking at human design, which is all about the energetics of a person. And even I need reminders. And, if I know how to muscle test because that's what we use in Psych K, but you can teach yourself. It's pretty easy. And even just like holding, certain foods or, if you want to take supplements or you need to take certain supplements, instead of actually asking someone, how much of this should I take? When should I take it? Ask your body. Your body's never going to lie to you and it's always going to guide you correctly, in my opinion.
And speaking of Psych K, I just wanted to share a little story about that. We had to me, it was a very profound effect within 24 hours of doing Psych K. So for the past 3 years for Natural Art Form, our business here, I haven't been running any ads and, frankly, haven't really needed to, but we want to grow the business and we have bigger goals now and that's going to be a part of it going forward. But for 3 years, I literally couldn't. Tried something with my Instagram, Facebook account was all messed up. Literally would click on a button and it would take me to the wrong spot. That kind of thing. Really frustrating things that were just like, you're blocked, you're blocked, you're blocked. And a lot of people would probably tell me like, well, that just is the universe telling you that you shouldn't go down that road. And maybe they're right. But I also am a little bit stubborn, but I want to have whatever tools available to me that are out there. I reached a point of frustration the other night to where Alexa was like, we need to Psych K this. So I was cussing at the computer. I'm like, I'm upset. I'm like, this
I didn't
thing.
say he needed to, just for the record. I asked him, would you like to do some Psych K? Because I can see that you're very frustrated. Yeah.
And it was just to the point where I'm like, I don't understand this. It literally, I click on it, it goes to the wrong page. There's no one at Facebook. It feels like there's nobody driving the ship. It's just an empty ghost ship. And anyways, I've been frustrated with them for a long time. And we did Psych K. We did 3 balances, I think, in the time frame of about, 30 minutes, 45 minutes?
Oh, not even. I think it was like 10, 15 minutes. So there's a few different balance processes. So first of all, we transformed the perception of stress around the situation first and foremost.
Meaning I was getting triggered and we kind of took the edge off a little bit so I wasn't as affected by it.
Yeah. And then you came up with a couple of different goal statements.
Yeah. Instead of complaining about it, I just decided what I wanted to do about it. And Psych K is brilliant for rewriting subconscious beliefs or shifting on subconscious beliefs and patterns. And if you haven't delved into this space, I'll shorten the whole, like you could take years to find, to go down this road, but basically your subconscious is what drives your life, a big part of it. And if you aren't aware of it, you'll drive your life unconsciously and you'll just hit bump after bump after bump, never knowing why. This is a way to actually take that, not so much into your control, but to just interact with it consciously. And once that belief pattern was shifted, once we wrote in a new perspective or a new subconscious belief, specifically around setting up my ad accounts with ease, that specific phrase, and Alexa is brilliant at helping you find the specific phrase that really encapsulates what you're feeling and what your goals are and all that. That's really critical to have a really good practitioner. Anyways, literally the next day, I'm clicking around like I've done probably 100 times at this point, just trying it one more time. And it just worked. It just clicked. I was able to add my products to my Instagram page as a shop. So now when I post with Natural Art Forum, I can actually tag the product that the post is about, which just makes it easier for people to actually click through and go to the site and look at it. And it was such a relief. I'm like, whoa, like that was 3 years coming. And literally I don't know, like maybe the universe conspired and it timed up perfectly with the update from Instagram. I don't care. Psych K was the thing that I'm giving the credit to the shift, and really opened my eyes about how that internal world, these internal beliefs that sometimes you're not even consciously running up here, are reflecting back to you in your external reality. And I've heard other people say that exact same thing. And here's an example. Here's another data point in the evidence bucket of that. So
yeah, I love that story. I remember my first training and my instructor, Rosie, who we've had on this show, she's a previous guest, and she shared a story, very similar story, where something had happened and she did a couple of balances and it just all worked out like that. It was so similar to that, where it was just like bada bing, bada boom, and it just worked out. And it's amazing. Like, those stories are amazing. And look, in all honesty, it doesn't always work like that. Like, it's not like, 24 hours and there's this huge change. Sometimes they can be more subtle shifts, but it is really incredible when you start to shift things internally, even outside of Psych K. Even like we've worked a lot with emotion code and things like that. And when you shift these things internally, it can actually be insanely quickly that things turn around in your external environment.
Yeah. Yeah, there really is something that people should look into. Alexa's a really talented practitioner. So
I'm a facilitator. We're called facilitators.
Oh,
yeah. Well, and again, that's a great point to make, because I love that about Psych K, is that we are just facilitating someone else through the process. We're not doing anything to you or for you. You're doing all the things. I'm just basically taking you through the process because I'm trained to do that.
Yeah. So this isn't another form of externalizing authority and externalizing, the help. And we've had that conversation with Rosie Pletzer about this, how the people that, when you're ready to make the change, the ones that are ready will find Psych K at the right time.
Yeah.
So if that's you, this episode is sponsored by Alexa's amazing facilitating skills.
Yeah. Thank you. And speaking of which, I always think of that quote from Rosie's episode where she said, I always forget it.
When the student is ready, the teacher appears.
That's the one. And I actually find that a lot with human design. It's really amazing how many people I meet, especially recently, like just in the last few weeks alone, where I'll meet people and ask them if they know about human design. They're just like, I've just recently heard about it. And I started looking into it, and then they'll meet me and I'm like, well, there you go.
Yep.
So I am holding a workshop in just a couple of weeks now. So the date currently is Saturday, the 29th of November. Now, it's probably going to change to the Sunday, the 30th. I'm just waiting on one person to confirm whether that date change is going to happen. So for now, if you're interested, just clear the weekend, or if you have a clear weekend, just book in because it'll be one of those dates. And I probably should know within the next 24 hours 100% what date it will be on. You can always join my mailing list. The link for that will be in the show notes, and all the info will go out, especially once the date change is confirmed. And we're going to explore relationships through the lens of human design in this workshop. One of my favorite areas to look at with human design is relationships. Again, Isaac and I have spoken about this a lot on this show, how it literally transformed the way we built the foundation of our relationship, because we both knew our human designs early on. Now, this is before I was like reading and knew it at depth, but even just the basic stuff that we knew, I just always say it's such a game changer when it comes to relationships, because not even just in romantic relationship, but even like my relationship with my mum. A couple of years ago, there was this one thing about my mum that just really annoyed me. And I used to always say, like, she just becomes like whoever she hangs around, and it really annoyed me. And then when I first looked into her human design, she's a mental projector, and environment to them is really important. And she also has an open G center, which is the identity center. So those people tend to be more like chameleons. Like they can literally just like their environment, people that they're around, they do very much sort of like adapt to that environment and to those people really easily. And when I learned that, I was just like, I feel really bad now about that annoying me so much, because that's just who she is. And so I just love that human design can bring such a deeper level of understanding and compassion in any relationship dynamic. So I'm inviting everyone. I've got people coming with their, I've got a mother-daughter coming. I've got mum coming that's bringing both her children's charts with her so she can explore that. If you've got a like business partnership, relationship, romantic relationship, really anything, you can explore any relationship dynamic in this workshop.
Big game changer. Really excited for that. And just follow Alexa's Instagram. It's, what is it, Realign with Alexa?
Yep.
And because I'm sure you'll announce it in your stories or something like
Yeah,
that once
yeah,
you
I'm
get
posting on there.
confirmation of the exact date. Leaning towards Sunday, but we'll see. So if you haven't signed up for the Natural Art Form newsletter, jump on that. We've got a big sale coming up. One of our, probably the biggest discount that we've done this year, but that is going to be just to people that get the newsletter. So go check that out at naturalartform.com. Sign up for the newsletter. That's going out here shortly.
Yes, we were very naughty and we've gotten it out late this month, but it actually kind of worked out pretty well because we're going to run this sale to the end of the year. So if you're stocking up on Chrissy presents now, which is the best time to do it, especially if you are ordering online, you really do want to sign up and make sure you can take advantage of this sale that we're running.
We've got, roughly maybe 50, 60 jars of Alleviate in the States. That's going to run out quick. So make sure you snag those up before we run out, because it'll take us some time to make it again. It's all small batch made, and we've got an operation set up in the States and an operation here in Australia. So that's how we're able to do this and ship worldwide and bring you the goods.
Mm-hmm. Well, without any further ado, let's get into the episode. If you listen to this and you know someone that could really benefit from hearing this conversation, definitely share this episode. Again, I love that Dawn's one of those people that the way that she speaks about things and explains things, it's not too jarring. So for people that this information might be very new to, I think this is a good episode that will really ease them in. So please share. We hope that you enjoy it, and let's get into it. Dawn Lester is a researcher and writer and has co-authored the books What Really Makes You Ill and The Nature of Reality. The decade-long research and writing project that led to What Really Makes You Ill involved taking a much deeper look into a whole variety of topics, not just health, and led to the inevitable discovery that so much of what we're told is wrong. This in turn enabled Dawn to re-examine some of the more difficult experiences of her own life, including her cancer diagnosis and subsequent treatment in the mid-90s. Through her understanding of the nature of reality, she has been able to gain valuable insights and view those painful past experiences from a different perspective, one that shows us that we are not victims of our past and that the future is not fixed. Instead, our past informs us about life, who we are, and what we can do right now to bring about the future we want. Inspired by the famous saying, to be the change you wish to see in the world, Dawn shares her insights and understanding to help people identify, process, and resolve the challenges they face.
All right. Well, we're pleased to have Dawn Lester with us all the way from mighty England. Good to have you, Dawn. Thank you.
Welcome.
No, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I've seen some of your interviews, but Alexa was just going over your bio a little bit before we started, and I was very fascinated with some of your stories and your history. So I'm very interested to hear how you have fared on your health journey. I know you had some challenges with cancer and whatnot. It seems like every movie that you see or TV show, if someone gets sick and they're in the hospital,
It's always cancer.
It's the big C word.
Yeah.
And so that's in the consciousness a lot these days.
Yeah.
But where would you like to start? We'll open it up and let you run with it for a bit. Tell us your story.
I'll keep it brief. In the mid-90s, I had a diagnosis of cancer, and I see it very differently now. However, at the time, I was not as aware as I am now. Obviously, I mean, that's 30 years ago. At the same time, I still had the sense of it being something for me, a message for me. It was something to do with my mindset. So I knew I had to make some changes in my life. So I started making some changes, and they were fairly slow. I must add here that because of where I was at the time, I had the surgery, chemo, radiation. As I was saying the other day, I kind of went into what I can only describe as neutral. I just shifted into neutral. I wasn't in fear. I mean, at the time I had a 7-year-old child, so I wasn't, and yet I wasn't in fear, even though, I grew up around, the big C, everyone talking about it, and, behind the hand and said in whispers, it was a big deal. I mean, people talking about it more now. I don't know. Well, I mean, as I say, I've got a completely different view of it now. So it was, it was strange. And as I say, I still realised, I still knew something intuitive, that it was something to do with my mindset, and it was for me to make changes. It was a wake-up call, if you like, even though I kind of wouldn't use those words, it's like this waking up thing. But it did feel like a wake-up call. So I started making changes, and eventually kind of moved away from the mainstream system, stopped going for checkups, stopped doing whatever. And I also realised that part of that was a message of one of the changes that was appropriate for me to make was to do with my marriage. So that ended in 2001, and at the same time I came across somebody who told me about some Reiki courses that were being held locally. So I went along, and I just was, oh wow, this is my thing. I really felt there was something that really spoke to me. I kind of resonated with it. So I started into that, and opening up to much more of that kind of esoteric side of things, reading, I don't know, I've read probably, Carlos Castaneda, one of the books anyway, Conversations with God, and those kinds of things as well. And also came across the, David Parker was running a course about the nature of reality, and when I took that course, it really again opened up and made me realise that there was something in there for me. So I learnt how to run that course. I ran the course a few times. And again, this is over time. We eventually turned that into a book. And as we were looking at the sense of the nature of reality being that we create our own reality. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Seth material, but that was an awfully large part of what I was learning. I mean, I read all of the books, and I knew there was something very profound in it all. Even though I know some people don't like channeled material, but at the same time, it's what's the message rather than the actual information, rather than how it came and who it is, whether it felt right. So because it did, and so as we were looking at, well, so part of the nature of reality, and the book was about, well, the nature of illness. Well, what is illness? Well, hang on a minute, these germs supposedly are out there to get us. So how does that work if, we're creating them, and yet we're, if you like, victims to germs? Well, we can't be victims to germs. And also we'd come across the biology of belief, Bruce Lipton. So that was well, hang on a minute, how does belief affect your body? So it was a big kind of opening up and asking questions, which started the dive down the rabbit hole of what germs are. And that also led to another book, a small book that we also published at the time, 2010, called Why Germs Don't Make You Ill and Drugs Can't Cure You. So, I mean, it's just a very, very brief overview, but at the same time, we knew we wanted to, put out more information. So then that led to more research and putting together the book that became What Really Makes You Ill, that was published in December 2019, just before 2020 hit. So, divine timing. So, so because it was before the whole COVID nonsense, it doesn't mention COVID. So somehow it didn't get the kind of attention, I mean, but it's still a challenging title, What Really Makes You Ill, with the subtitle, Why Everything You Thought You Knew About Disease Is Wrong. And that had a couple of challenges by kind of mainstream, but it didn't lead to any sort of problems with the book, so that went out. And I've carried on researching and learning, and I'm looking, and certainly the last 3 years probably, I've been looking far, far deeper into the mental, emotional, psychological, that emotional side of things, because I know it's so powerful. It's a really important part of it, and certainly in the context of cancer, because as you were saying, there's a lot of talk about it, and the language around it is, you get it, or you pass it on, or it's genetic, or it's this, or it's that, and it really is not any of those things. It's a process, and it's really difficult because you get these labels, and it's all about labels. So my focus really is on dissolving these ideas about labels, these diseases being distinct labels, and saying, these are conditions, and getting people to, or encouraging people to see the process of symptoms, what they are, what they're for, and that they're not necessarily just physical, that there's, an emotional side to it, and mainly suppressed emotions, or suppressed issues, or suppressed psychological issues, spiritual issues. It's the, as I say, you could say it's the body speaking to you, but it's the, if you like, the who we are beyond the physical, helping us learn something through the body, which I know that might be a bit of a stretch for some people, because it sounds a bit weird, but it's.
What is cancer? What are these diseases? And you just went right into it. And my opinion, I think you nailed it. But what with cancer? I know there's German New Medicine. I know they have a viewpoint of it. Are you familiar with German New Medicine? And what do you think about that stance and that view of what causes cancer, or what is going on there?
I I am aware of it. I haven't studied it in any depth, so I can't say too much. But I know that there's something within that cancer is what is called cancer, or what is diagnosed, what is labelled. It is like all other conditions. It's a process within the body, and to a certain extent, it's a deeper issue, and almost always. And again, I don't know all cases, so I'm not going to make any statements about everything, and because I can't do that. At the same time, I am aware that a lot of the information, certainly a lot of the studies, show that there is an emotional, I'd say emotional, but a non-physical component. There is something that it's an opportunity to learn, discover something, to find out what our journey is about. I mean, but that's, again, that can be sort of a bit strange for some people, but all conditions are processes. Now, what are called acute conditions are usually called infectious diseases. They're self-limiting processes, and they're usually connected to some kind of detox or clearing out, or just a simple process. They're self-limiting, and they don't need suppressing. The symptoms don't need to be suppressed. When they're more chronic conditions, and I might add in, as the research, we discovered that the medical system, for the most part, doesn't understand these chronic conditions. Because when you look at the definitions, they say we don't know exactly what causes it. We're not entirely sure. There's all this qualifying language, and it's they really do not understand them, because they're deeper processes, and they're only ever looking at one little bit of the body at any one time, and they don't look at the body as a whole. So that's one of the problems. And they don't bring what you could call the mind into it as well, the mental part of it. And missing that out is just huge, because that is part of it. So that's where, with the German New Medicine, it is definitely some kind of situation that the body is processing. And sometimes it could be something suppressed from a long time ago that leads us to have certain stories in our heads about who we are, what we are, I don't know, people may have stories in their heads that say that, they're not worthy, or they're not wanted, or they're not this, that and the other, and that holds them back from their, living their lives to the full. And so there are ways that if you like, the soul or the spirit will bring a message and use the body as to present symptoms that says, no, there's something you need to look at here. So there's definitely that part of it, as I say, that I feel is it's definitely missing from the mainstream, and in some ways it's missing from some alternative systems that only look at things from a certain way. But anyone that's holistic is really looking at the whole body and the mind as well. Then they're going to have a better understanding of what's happening in the body. I mean, that's so yes, we have all different labels.
Yeah, I think that's such a huge paradigm shift for people, is when you stop viewing symptoms as there's something wrong with me, and actually looking at, well, why is this presenting? What is the reason? What is the message? Like, I love that language. Like, what is the message behind this happening? And especially bringing it back to, what you said earlier about the nature of reality and how we create our own reality. Everything that we manifest, especially in the physical body, is preceded by something that's happening mentally or emotionally, or in the metaphysical. And that's such a huge paradigm shift for people. And I think once you get your head around that, and you start to view it very differently, you start to treat things very differently. Because I know that was very big in my journey, was I literally focused only on the physical. And I suffered with mental health issues for quite a long time, from like all through adolescence, depression, anxiety. I was then diagnosed with bipolar 2 at around the age of 24, I think I was. And, and of course handed a prescription, like a lifelong prescription for some medication. And I was like, no, thanks. That's the last resort for me. And, and look, at first it's not to completely write off all, focusing on your physical body, because that's also very important. But it kind of I got to a certain point and like, I felt like there was still something missing. It helped a lot. Like cleaning up my diet and lifestyle helped a lot. I've never identified with being bipolar 2. Like I look at my life at that time and I'm like, no wonder I was up and down. I was like taking drugs and drinking a lot and partying, and I was, not living healthily at all. And so, I kind of toned all that down, really focused on like eating well, exercising, and that shifted a lot for me. But then I still suffered with anxiety. I still like ended up in really unhealthy relationships, this kind of thing. And then it really wasn't until I started doing, the psycho-emotional spiritual work that my whole life changed. And in turn, like, yes, I still have things come up, but all of those like chronic issues that I had just stopped affecting me. And if they come back, obviously it's normal to, feel anxiety at times, or, feel a bit depressed at times, but it's not like this hole that, I go into. And I think that speaks to a lot of people's experience when they shift from just focusing on the physical to start focusing on more of that spiritual, mental, emotional stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It is both. And it is also important to recognize that, the body does undergo the results of that kind of emotional stress, in it. And the organs can be, I say damaged, but I mean, not necessarily serious, but there's something that, they need support to be to get back to functioning, should we say, optimally. So, yes, I recognize that the body needs support. However, it's only, the body heals itself. It's just that we're helping it. So what we do and what we take will help the body, help to support the body. I think that's the simplest way. And so at the same time, by helping support your body, you're also in a different mindset of, I don't know, maybe sort of moving more into taking care of yourself, looking after yourself. And that's not from a selfish way, because that's also part of the conditioning of, oh, you can't be selfish, but it's, well, you have to look after yourself. So that may bring up all kinds of other emotional ideas of things that have been suppressed about how people may, how one may have felt about oneself. I'm just being aware of the language. So people may, how they feel about themselves, how they've been spoken to when they were younger, and they've held on to a certain idea of who they are. And that will come up to be released in some ways. Now, I mean, you say, you are very different now. And I mean, that's great to hear. At the same time, we are all on a journey. So it's not to say, oh, well, I've got that fixed. I'm fine and everything's fine, and because then if other symptoms come up, you can start beating yourself. People might start beating themselves up and say, well, I thought I'd fix this. What's, again, the important point, say wrong, air quotes around the wrong. So it's then to say, well, it's a journey. There's something new. Go, okay, here's another opportunity to say, well, okay, what's this about? It may be just, okay, time to have a bit of a rest. But it's so important that, the point you made about people feeling that there's something, again, air quotes, wrong with them. And of course, then because we know how we talk to our bodies is so important, the placebo-nocebo effect, that if you're saying there's something wrong, there's something wrong with me, then you're giving your body that message, so there's something wrong. And these are the languaging changes that we need to gain that different perspective, so we can stop seeing ourselves as, or people stop seeing themselves as victims of what's going on. I'm changing my language because I'm aware I don't want to start giving myself any messages of the way I'm, saying, I am wrong or anything like that, because the body hears that, which I know it does sound weird. At the same time, it is the case. I mean, at a presentation, with the audience, I encouraged them to have. There were 3 different phrases I'll say what they are, but to get people to see how they felt, how those different phrases felt in their body. So one was, "I am angry," so just to sit with that, and then "I feel anger," and then "anger is arising." So it's whether you identify with it, and that's the thing with all these labels in terms of the medical system. That people are then given a label that they attach to themselves, and it becomes part of them, instead of seeing it as a process and part of a journey. It's an identification, and that's part of the issue. So it was great that you said that you never held that label of that label was not part of you. You didn't hang on to it. And I don't know that there's a difference bipolar 2 to bipolar, or but again, it's just different labels. It's probably just a slight change in the combination of symptoms that people present with, that they say, well, it's a different sort of bipolar. So okay, and again, as I say, just labels, but great that you not to hold that label as an identification.
Yeah. And I think that's so prevalent now, especially I'm finding more and more with like ADD and ADHD, because everyone's getting diagnosed with ADHD these days. Like I'm finding a lot more people in adulthood now are getting diagnosed with ADHD, and it is becoming this thing that like they almost like introduce themselves as, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. I have ADHD." It's kind of bizarre to me, but again, I think that, well, I've got to say, I'm gonna say this, because the issue I have with this, because I met someone recently, or like sometime this year, I was in a training group, and this gentleman was in the group, and that's how he introduced himself, and as I have ADHD and neurodivergent, and I'm looking into doing this training because so that it can help me, and which is great. But just from my observation throughout this, it was like a 10-week training course. I just thought, this guy, there's nothing wrong with this guy. He's just uniquely him. And I think this is, again, the problem with, if you don't fit inside this box, we're going to give you a diagnosis, and that's what you are, and you can't change it. There's nothing you can do about it. You just got to learn to live with it. And they're given coping mechanisms more than actual, like what I would call treatment that actually does, like, not that I think that in terms of like in this example I'm giving, not that I think he needs to like change anything. I just think he's just uniquely him. Like he's just different to, what's inside this box. And yeah, to me, I just find it really strange that it's becoming so much more common that now adults are being diagnosed with ADHD all the time. And then part of that too is like in children, I think a lot of especially young boys are getting diagnosed with ADHD, probably because they don't want to be sitting in a classroom for 6 hours a day, because that's so unnatural for kids to do, especially boys that have a lot of energy. And I think it's becoming the same way with adults now, because they're probably in a 9-to-5 job that they hate, that's like not what they really want to be doing, and they're not utilizing their energy in the way that they should be. And then they get, diagnosed with quote unquote ADHD.
Yes, I agree. I mean, as you say, with the labels, and it's interesting with, as you say, adult diagnoses of these so-called conditions, and, as you say, with people not fitting into a box, and they say normal, and yet there is no such thing as the normal. There is no normal person. As you say, each one of us is different. We are all individuals. And the idea that we have to fit in a box, obviously, we're not the sort to want to fit in a box, are we? So I think part of that is also, and some of the labels that they brought into the most recent DSM, I think mainly for children, but there's was it the oppositional defiant disorder, which I think a lot of us who are challenging things and questioning things would be put into if they could. But, we know what this is intended to do is to make us feel, oh, we shouldn't be different. Go, well, everyone is different. We're all different. That's the point. Even twins are not, theoretically, so-called identical twins are not absolutely identical. There will be differences. And so, absolutely, when you look at it in the big picture, of course we're all different. Why would we be all the same? What's the discovery, the opportunity to remember, learn who we are, reconnect with who we truly are if everyone's the same. But of course, it's the idea. I mean, we are social beings, and some people don't like to be outside of that. They aren't comfortable being on their own, and so they like to be part of the group. And not everyone likes to. Not everyone needs to necessarily put their head above, the crowd or speak out, because people get drawn down. We're not encouraged to speak out. Except that now's the time when more and more of us are saying, we're going to speak out. Doing it in the right way and sharing information, but not doing it from a way of, well, I suppose some people are doing it from a more rebellious way, but it's learning how to do that and to learn that it's actually okay to be different. And as you say, when people use that, that's my name and that's my label. Sad.
Yeah, and the people
sad.
making the labels, they're just regular people. They're just the kind of people that, like, for instance, the DSM for mental health conditions and psychiatric evaluations and all that. That's someone's job. So their job is to identify and label things. So it's like they're just going to find things to label.
Yeah.
And they'll keep, because you don't want to lose your job. So you just keep finding more and more ways to describe things and apply labels. And I like that there's this growing message that people can be free from that. And if you want to fit in that label, you spoke of channeled works. I heard one, Dr. Jennifer Daniels, if you're familiar with her, she brought up one from someone named Seth, an entity or something called Seth. And it talked about the stories that people want to play out.
Yeah, that's one that Dawn mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one I thought was very important, especially with COVID, because understanding pandemics, was that part of that book or part of that channeling? Was they asked, like, why did pandemics happen? And I don't know if you can explain a little bit of that book and, like, what that revealed about the stories that people choose to participate in.
Oh, it's a long time ago that I read the I think it's called The Way Toward Health, something like that. It's a long time ago since I read, and I maybe have slightly different views from what's actually in the book. At the same time, the idea of pandemics, epidemics is partly because of our social nature. We are all connected, and even though we are encouraged to believe the idea that there are these invisible enemies that are being spread, and that's why people in a similar environment have similar symptoms at a similar time, and they go, see, everyone, and they always, a lot of people say, oh, everyone, and when you ask them, say, well, it was most people. So a lot of people have similar symptoms at a similar time, and because it seems to progress from one person and then another one the next day, it seems to be something that is transmitted, and yet there is zero evidence for that. There are plenty of studies that in the past that they actually tried to transmit something physical. Now, I'm not denying that there may not that there may be an energetic aspect to it, that there's that part of it, that there's something energetic. It could be something environmental. It could be a change in the environment, because the Invisible Rainbow, Arthur Firstenberg talked about the introduction of new electrical systems in different places, and that seemed to spark many people being ill at the same time. I wouldn't say that is the cause. It is a factor, because there are always lots of factors, and this is one of the problems. People want to know what it is. You say, well, it's not a germ. Well, what is it? Well, I can't tell you, because it's lots of things. So there will be an energetic component. There is also the fear-mongering component, which is, can't be ignored, because, just look at what happened in 2020 with all that, the reporting and the push daily, just on and on with, the symptoms and this, and it was pushed out so much. And, as I say, the nocebo effect is well known, so people can read all these different symptoms, slight tickle in their throat, suddenly, they've got something, and their bodies manifest the symptoms because they're in fear. They believe, so it's just the whole belief systems, the whole everything will then, encourage those symptoms. And sometimes the fear just puts the body out of sorts, and then it's trying to rebalance, return to homeostasis, and so that's part of where the symptoms are. So they're because we are all connected. Then there is a resonance, an energetic resonance of something happening, and yet it's that side of it, because you say, well, prove it. You can't show it, prove it in some kind of laboratory, and so it's difficult. But it is known that we resonate with each other. We know that when you feel the vibes going into a room, they can be good, or just somebody else being in a good mood can lift your mood, and that's an energetic, if you like, energetic something, the same, like, if somebody sneezes, you might sneeze, but there's not a sneeze germ, it's so that there's something somewhere where, we kind of respond to what's going on around us.
Yeah, and I think I love that you said like you made the point about like we all want to know what it is, and I've got to say I'm one of those people. I'm very curious. Where often I wanted to like, what's that from? But very different now. Before I used to be like, oh, who was I with? Was someone sick, or what caused me to get sick? Whereas now I'm just like, oh, what's going on emotionally? Like what's coming up for me? And sometimes even then there's not really an answer, and arguably it's really not that important as long as you can, nurture yourself and care for yourself in the way that you need with whatever it is that's coming up. I was going to make another point there and now I've totally lost it. Oh, so what you mentioned the biology of belief, Bruce Lipton, who amazing work that he's done. And he's actually very closely affiliated with Psych K, which is a modality that I use that is basically a set of processes to rewrite subconscious beliefs. So we work on limiting beliefs and perceptions. And the originator, Rob Williams, used to do talks, like speaking gigs that Bruce Lipton would be at, and they became really good friends. And Bruce Lipton loves Psych K and spooks it, and he's involved. And it's interesting too, actually, just on that point, that both Psych K and Human Design, so two things that I work with now, they're based on channeled material. And so I'm totally with you. I've never been into listening to people that channel and all this stuff, but there's definitely something to say when the channeled material, like you put it into practice and it actually works. Like to me, that's all that really matters. But going back to, biology of belief, I think that says so much about the reasons we get sick, because even just the belief that you can catch something from someone else, I think that's more what's bringing on the illness than the germs or the physical interaction. it's the belief that that can happen, and then it brings it on. But there's also the energetic side of it, where it's almost like these unexplainable things. Like Isaac's had an experience where him and his daughter both got sick at the same time with the exact same thing, same symptoms, but they were like in different parts of the world. And so there's so much more, I think, that we don't even fully understand when it comes to the nature of what makes us sick. And again, I think it's people need to be able to let go of that. I need to know the answer, you know?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's an important point you made when you said, you know, you want to know what it is, even emotionally. I'm not really sure, but it still got you to, or it still encouraged you to take care of yourself. And maybe that was the message. It's, you know, time for some self-care. You know, take some time out, have a bit of a rest. It was just, it may have been nothing more complex than that to remind you to look after yourself. Again, I'm not saying that's what it was. And yes, and as you say, sometimes we just go, what is it? What is it? What's it? You know, and it's not always obvious. And the more you try, the harder it is to find it. So quite often it is just to say, okay, I'm not sure what this is about, and open yourself up to receiving some feedback. And somebody may say something to you, or, you know, it's just when we're trying to do it intellectually, then we're not necessarily listening to our intuition. And it's that is giving us the message. And I think, you know, a lot more people are learning to listen to that, you know, to ourselves. And this is it. It's to start with ourselves and remember. No, I mean, it's a great point about the, you know, the psyche. I've heard of it. I don't know much about it. But as you say, with, you know, our beliefs and when it works, when it actually does something, you think, yeah, no, there's something here. What some people tend to do is say, oh, well, that's the answer, and put it in the, well, that's the only thing to do. And I'm more and more convinced that that is one of a whole collection, because we're all different. And so some certain modalities may work for some people and others may work for others. So and I think that's telling us that there isn't one simple answer. So let's explore. And there's a lot, and I totally agree, there's a lot we still don't know. So let's say, okay, these are different tools in the toolbox. Let's see what else there is. Let's open up and be curious about what other things we might find. And, you know, we're learning about water, you know, from the work of Veda Austin. You know, we're learning about, you know, if you're familiar with the telepathy tapes, you know, we're learning about what's going on and these non-verbal autists. And like you're saying with ADD, ADHD, you know, these different labels, they've been given a label as if there's something, again, air quotes, wrong with them, and yet there isn't. Here's an opportunity to learn something amazing through a very different perspective and a very different medium of communication. And we all have these abilities. It's just we have forgotten. You know, we haven't used them. So it's saying, okay, let's use them. And that's also part of the getting the balance between the intellect that is saying, oh, I want the answers, what are the answers? And listening to the intuition that may give us something more subtle than a simple answer.
Yeah, so I like the mention of the telepathy tapes and Veda Austin, because she's been working with them, some of the children as well, and discovering more about potential remedies, including symbols and shapes that can just be placed on the wall and will have an effect. And that just reminded me back to we had a recent talk with Stephen A. Young out in Scotland, and they have the Rosslyn Chapel out there with it's like basically an alchemical book inscripted into this building, and there's symbols and all this shapes to the structure. And I've heard people hypothesize that these chapels and these cathedrals may have potentially been used for healing of some sort, using sound and resonance. But these ideas are starting to come more to the forefront. And I love that the idea that if you're getting sick and it may not be a particle, then you don't know what it actually is in reality, could be a little frightening. But I like to point people back towards these other avenues of healing that are coming up that maybe we're remembering. Maybe these are brand new things, but I feel like maybe they're just coming back around into our consciousness. And so to give people a bit of hope and to alleviate some of that confusion, not by telling them the answers, but by encouraging them to go out and find new answers, better answers, and so your research and the way that you speak about it, I like that it's hopeful and it's open to these possibilities, but it's also grounded in like, what are people actually finding? What are they actually documenting and testing and figuring and comparing to reality and comparing to other people's stories and experiences?
Oh, yes, I know Steve Young, and I've been to Rosslyn Chapel a couple of times, and each time that there's something amazing about it. Yes, I think he's referring to some of those within that structure, that they are slightly different and different symbols, and he's associating them with sort of different tones and different, so it's sort of musical. I've not dived deeply into the whole Tataria. I've kind of got half a foot into it because it's not my main kind of area of research. So it's like it's almost like a sideline, because it is fascinating, as you say, with and it makes absolute sense, with the bells and the organs and the shapes and everything, that they are, and there's an energetic aspect to them there, and that's also why I would imagine the religious organisations took them over, because they know there's something energetic, so people are going to feel a certain way within these buildings, and they're going to. The idea was to, I would imagine, to harness that and put it in the direction that they wanted them to take. So, into the religion, rather than the real, the bigger, the much grander, not idea, but sort of proposal that that's about energy and tuning into everything of who we are and harmony and also healing, because of the shapes and the the way they resonate, that people do feel something special within these buildings. And then they are just fascinating and stuff. I never used to be particularly interested in architecture, but since learning, I now look at buildings completely differently. Certainly the old ones, you're just drawn to them. You think, wow. There's something very special, and they're not just decorations for the sake of decoration. There's something very important, not important, but there's something potent, if you like, in everything. There's something. They were part of what they were intended to be. So it's not just, let's say, decoration. It's part of it. It's part of the the geometry, the biogeometry, whether it's harmonics, all of that. Absolutely fascinating, and takes us back to the idea of, we're supposed to be, I don't believe in the theory of evolution, but, that's what we're told, we are higher beings, therefore they were just primitive. And you look at these buildings, you think, that's not primitive. They don't do things like that now, so they don't create that. So, they're fascinating.
Yeah, and it says a lot too, like even that we actually had someone reach out to us who we're going to potentially look at getting on next year, that works now in the space of healing with music, through music. and they're actually like studying it. So like they're doing brain scans and like all these things to actually like prove that it's working. And I find that super fascinating. And again, I feel like we're just at this precipice now of really going into like the true nature of healing and what is actually required. Because like you said, and I actually love that you made that point, Dawn, because I say that all the time on this show. And it's why we speak to so many people on so many different topics, especially when it comes to healing modalities, because some things are going to work for, one person and not for the next, and vice versa. So I think that, ultimately it comes down to people taking more responsibility for themselves. And I think for a lot of people, that's really scary when it comes to their health, because we're so indoctrinated to go to the doctor when something's wrong, do what the doctor says, go to, even in the natural health space, it's still the same paradigm. You go to the naturopath, you go to the, whatever it is, the kinesiologist, you go to the person and you do what they say, or they do something for you because you can't do it yourself. And so I think once you really step out of that, it really does come down to, I think a lot of it is like trial and error and experimenting to some degree with what works best for you and what you resonate with and what also gets you results. But I just think there's so much out there now that, again, we're sort of just starting to discover, things like this healing with music and sound healing and, all these different modalities. Homeopathy seems to have this really huge revival. And, and I think it is, a lot of it's going back to energy. It's like in my eyes, it's all energy medicine.
Oh, I agree. And the point you made about responsibility is huge. I mean, it is fundamental, really. And so it doesn't mean that we don't go to other people, but they aren't doing the healing. They are helping us learn about how to support our body so it can heal itself. So healers now are, I see them as sort of different. They're not the ones doing the healing per se. Anyone who says that I will heal you is missing the point. It's I can share what I know so you and to help you support your body. So my good friend Dr. Marisol Arce, I don't know if you know about her. She's a naturopath, and so she's totally aware of the nonsense of the germ theory. I mean, she's been looking at that for years. So she provides whatever it is to help people, to support their own bodies. So by understanding what's wrong, if you like, or what symptoms are showing up. So I shouldn't say wrong. To understand what the symptoms are and listening to what they're saying about their lives. You put a whole picture together. So it is holistic. And then see what the body is asking for to support it. And that's the same for homeopathy. And I mean, I have to confess, I was very skeptical about homeopathy. Up until very recently, in the last couple of years, I've started learning and realizing it's not about something that's in those pills. It's not about the substance. It is the energetic. And so it's an energetic signature that's helping the body to support the body to deal with whatever it's dealing with that is showing up as symptoms. And again, there's so much to learn. So, I mean, with sound healing, there's, I don't know if you've come across Eileen McCusick's work with the tuning forks. So, the bifield tuning, I mean, she's amazing. Yeah, she's amazing. And you're talking about healing with music. I don't know if you're aware of, he goes by the name of the conspiracy music guru, Alex Michael. He's put out a number of videos. You know of him? Okay, yeah. Well, he is a musician. He's as well as producing videos. I mean, he's an amazing musician, and he's been producing work in 432 hertz. He's put out 2 albums called True Solfeggio. He's working on the 3rd. So, and he has had many people respond to him and say, send him messages, in various different ways, and saying those albums have helped them enormously, and they've healed through listening to that music. He's got a whole. I interviewed. Yes, I mean, he was on my podcast about a month ago, and there's a page on his website where there are testimonials of the people who've experienced, not as received, who've experienced changes in their health. They slept better. All sorts of symptoms and things have changed as the result of listening to his music. So, and again, because it's in 4/3/2 rather than
I saw the first album. That was incredible. He's a very talented singer, guitar player. He Alexa, you probably haven't heard too much of his stuff. He's hilarious. He's super funny. Because he did a whole album, and everyone thought he was a Texas, like Alabama Southern guy. I think it was his Flat Earth album, but he's from the UK, and now I think he lives near Mike Wilkerson in Spain.
Oh wow! I remember them talking about him.
Yes, they are neighbours. Yes, I actually was out in Spain and I met them. September. Yeah, September. Oh, yes. So yes, no. Absolutely. I fell for that as well. I thought, there's an American, because he's, with the accent and the hat and everything in his videos. And then I heard him speaking. It was like, wow, he's just he's a guy from Essex, from not too far away from where I live. I mean, originally, but he's, as I say, he's now in Spain. And he's a lovely guy, really talented musician, really.
Yeah. His music was, it was a part of my learning about that, because I heard him on Crow 777, and that's where they talked a lot about the, the alchemical stuff, and then the solfeggio frequencies, and then listening to Eileen McCusick. And I'm actually going to meet her out in California at one of the Music and Sky festivals, and there's something very interesting with the sound healing, because I've had that. I don't know, I was going through emotional stuff and I had these bad stomach aches. And I remember hearing just a short snippet of what she was talking about, doing the sound tuning, the vocal tuning. And intuitively, I just kind of started playing around with different tones and found one that made my stomach ache end immediately. And I've used it since here to interrupt feeling nauseous. And it can be quite effective, and just using the hue tone, but singing it at different levels. I don't know specifically what notes, but just singing the word hue. That's one that I picked up. Just that word it goes back to maybe some ancient Sanskrit, something or others, but this stuff it's real and it's intuitive. It's somewhere within our DNA. Otherwise, how would it be so easy to just kind of figure it out and use it and actually feel an immediate effect?
Yes, I mean, sound is, because everything's energy, so it's electromagnetic, so sound and light are parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. Sound and light are fundamental parts of this realm, if you like. There's so it's not surprising that we're moving into developing a deeper understanding of sound and light and energy, because that's connecting us to what this realm is. Again, moving away from these systems that have tried they've tried to control us with. And I think that's also what 2020 was about, the beginning of getting us to realise that we need to start looking at things differently. So again, a kind of, if you like, a collective wake-up call. And it's really, really shifted a lot of people moving into all sorts of different directions of different perspectives, and opening up questions of what sound is, what light is, what water is, all of these things, and just asking the questions. So the curiosity, because we've been taught not to ask questions. So now we're saying, oh well, no, we're not going to do that anymore. So we're asking questions, and so everything's opening up. The more we ask questions, the more that opens up, and we're moving into really exciting areas where we're learning so much more. I mean, we can't all learn everything about everything. Which is frustrating sometimes, because it's just like, wow, look at this is fascinating, and you want to kind of move into all these different directions. It is showing us that the energy aspect is really important. Understanding we don't actually know what energy is. At the same time, we're learning what it can do, or what we can do, or what it's about, or asking the questions and finding out more. So it's connecting to a more expanded view of who we are. At the same time, it's not about denying this physical form and living life. It's not about kind of moving out into beyond the physical, because we are still here and learning how to look after our bodies, and so that then allows us to open up and in what we do with our lives and in our lives. And we do have to look after ourselves first, and as you say, Alexa, the responsibility, taking responsibility, and that seems to be hard for many people, because it might mean they may have to make changes, and maybe they don't want to. So I'm finding more and more that I say, well, here's the information, it's up to you. We can't make people. At the same time, it's it's wanting to help without imposing it. It's an interesting way of saying, well, but life could be so much more exciting if we're all healthier and alive and vital, and then that allows for more journeys and more investigations and more inquiries, and being able to look at different things. It's about, I think, opening up to more possibilities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also, because I think especially when it comes to our health, and again, like when we've grown up in a society where we are taught to outsource our health to someone else and basically be, just do what we're told. I think it can feel quite overwhelming, where people, might feel like they've got to make changes, but they've got to change everything. And I think it's important to note that it's like, just start with like baby steps. I mean, because I actually studied holistic nutrition way back when. And again, that's kind of what started like me on my journey. Like, it started with my own healing. And again, even in my, the work that I do and the things that I've learnt and studied, again, it started with more of the physical side, and then the holistic nutrition degree that I was doing, it does it brings in sort of like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic. So it touches on, the energy side of things, but honestly, it was like a drop in the ocean what we learnt. And there was something there for me though, where I was like, there's more to this. Like there's definitely more to this. And I never ever worked as a nutritionist, because I kind of was like, I don't really want to like tell people what to eat and, prescribe them supplements. And that really is what sparked like my own journey into sort of the work that I do now, and going deeper into the, psycho, spiritual, emotional work. And that's, we were taught, like, never give anyone, like in their first consultation, never give them more than 3 things to change. And even then, I just think if you can just change one thing, like, just start there, because it has an accumulative effect. And if you can just do like baby steps and build on those, that's way more effective than what most people do, is like, I'm going to overhaul everything. and then they get through a week and they're just like, this is way too hard. And then they just revert back to their old ways. So I just want to make that point to anyone listening, because especially when you're not there yet, or you just think like, I gotta start taking responsibility for my health, and it can feel a bit overwhelming. It's like just baby steps.
Oh, I totally agree. And it can, people can feel very overwhelmed. Yeah, I mean, I don't actually give advice, but if somebody asked me, what's the one thing, I would suggest that they move away from processed foods and into like natural foods. I mean, and I'm, I don't do the diet thing because we're all different and different people like different foods, and so it's not about the diet, it's about the actual foods that you're feeding your body. So, and I think that's sometimes where when people change their diet, they think, oh, this diet works, and it's not. It's just because they've shifted away from processed foods and into fresh foods, should we say, or fresh or natural foods, well, whatever the word is. I mean, it's daft that we, have to use the word real food, but, it's moving away from the packaged stuff and moving to real food. I mean, that's one step. The other one I think is probably more, like you say, the psycho-spiritual, emotional side of start caring for yourself, or to even maybe ask them why they're not caring, because I think it's not necessarily about telling people, it's more to ask questions so that they can find what it is for themselves, within themselves, that is giving them the difficulty or with taking responsibility, or why it feels overwhelming, or what it is. It's I mean, like you said, there's so much information about this is good for you, this is bad for you, and that could be, 1 week something is good for you, the next week. So it's to not outsource. I mean, it's so important not to outsource, and to say, to help people find whatever it is to look after themselves, to care for themselves, nourish themselves, mentally as well as physically, to see what it is. That's something I do when I have conversations with people, to ask them, or to hear what they're saying and how they're talking about themselves, and to say, did you hear you say, that about yourself? And because again, habits, language, and words, and how we speak to ourselves, and how we program our bodies, or like Bruce Lipton talks about at the cellular level, but I mean, how we're programming our energy, move away from the physical, but programming our energy, that's our energy that we're putting back into our body and recycling. Even, our approach to the food as well. And it's not to say, oh, well, you can eat anything if you believe it's okay. It's, there's still the physical side of it, so it's getting that balance of both. But yeah, I mean, absolutely encourage people to just take a step, just try one thing, just one thing at a time to shift. And it's not like just one time. I mean, it depends on the person, because, everyone's different, but at least to try one thing. I mean, absolutely, it's, so important to take a step.
Yeah.
Well, what worked for me, I was working in the oil field back in when I lived in the U.S., and I wanted to live as healthy as I could, just knowing that I'm in a very toxic environment with all the chemicals and all the stuff that we're drilling with. So I was like, all right, the one thing I can do, because I really needed that job at the time, I was like, I'm just going to take control of my diet and eat as good as I can, eat as well as I can. And the simplest thing that I could recommend to people to start with, even if you're not into like the organic stuff, if you haven't gone that route yet, just start like in America. I don't know if it's the same in the UK. It's kind of the same here, but if you stick to the outside walls of the grocery store, that's where the stuff that doesn't come in boxes and packages typically
the
is.
produce, milk, cheese. produce, dairy, meat, pretty much.
Yeah, and then once you get inside the aisles, that's when everything has all these other ingredients and preservatives and all this stuff. So just shopping the outside walls of the grocery store, and then try that for a week. And if you can do it for a week, you can do it for a month. And I started doing that in the oil field. It was a little bit trickier to do on because I was gone from home for about 20 days at a time. So I'd have to buy everything in one shot and try to predict what I would eat for the next 20 days. So I ended up just being very, very simple with what I ate. But that's a way to do it too. Just keep it simple and then go from there. Observe the differences in your body. And but it takes some time, to see changes. So don't expect it to change after 1 week or 1 month.
Well, that's what most people fall into, that trap. And I mean, I'm guilty of it too, especially over the years, because it takes, I've heard so many different things. Like I've done NLP training and listened to a lot of different people speak about this stuff. Like some people will say it takes 21 days to rewire a habit, like, neurally. In my training, I was taught that it takes 66 days of doing something every day to rewire the brain, the patterning. But either way, it takes more than a week or a couple of weeks. It's like nothing's going to stick if you're just doing it for a short period of time and expecting all these huge changes. But I just want to also bring it back to intuition, because you mentioned that a few times, Dawn, and I think that's such an important place to start. And that's what I would also recommend to people is like start by, if you feel like you're not connected to your intuition, start tapping into that and feeling into like, what does that feel like for you? How does your intuition speak to you? Because I think that's going to be that is your inner guidance system. And like, there's so much, I think we get information overload now. Like there's just, with the internet, we just have access to everything. And it can be so overwhelming. Like, oh, what should I be eating? What diet? What kind of exercise should I be doing? Should I be doing gluten-free? Like there's just so much out there now. And then, it's a whole other world when it comes to modalities and, what practitioners you can see and things like that. But I just think your intuition will always guide you to what you need. And I think the more people can connect with that and really tap into it to a point where it just becomes second nature, honestly, you don't really need any of the external stuff anymore. Like the noise will just kind of die down and you just really start listening to your own body, to your own wisdom.
Totally. There was a couple. One of the things, the listening to the sort of external sources, what should I do, and that's part of the. Well, the only thing you should do is listen to yourself, and I wouldn't dream of saying what anybody should do, because that's not for me to say. It's for us to learn. It is still that indoctrination of thinking I need to listen to other people to find out what I should do, and so listening back to ourselves. The other point also to say, when people do make changes in their diet, that's only one aspect of it, but it's one of the aspects that we can actually control. So taking responsibility is, first of all, saying, what can I actually do? Now, there are certain, as you say, external environments you may not be able to do anything about. So you can make changes within your own home environment, looking at the products that you use, for example, and substituting the one, just removing the ones with lots of chemicals in them. And, there are plenty of ways of, cleaning the house or whatever with more natural products. And what you put actually on your body, and so obviously what you put in your body, so your food and your water and things like that. It's also important when you make that change that there may be some symptoms that come as a result of that, because you are changing. You think, oh, this is making me ill. Well, no, it's not making you ill, and that's why it's so important to understand what symptoms are. It's the body recognizing that it's now got an opportunity to clear some of the build-up of toxins. So because you've now shifted to a less heavily toxic diet, and toxins are not like in a bad way, but all the chemicals that are used in the foods and the different ingredients in these packaged tinned products. So the body will probably respond by having a bit of a clear out, and so people may have symptoms, and it's to be aware that isn't bad. It's your body's natural processes, and I think that can discourage people and make them give up as well. You know, if they experience, well, I don't feel well. Well, it's not that you don't feel well. And the other thing also is to recognise that, you know, we are stronger than, or you know, more resilient, shall we say? No, I mean, not stronger as in physically, but our bodies, our whole energy system, the energy system that is us, is more powerful than a lot of these external influences, unless we allow ourselves to weaken it by feeling weak and living in fear that XYZ is going to, you know, attack us, make us ill, make us feel well, which goes back to, you know, the energetics of why lots of people can be ill at the same time, because they're all fallen into the, oh, you know, this is happening, this is going to make us all ill, you know, that whole mindset, you know, that just pervades, that's what pervades a group of people. So there are, again, so many parts to all of this to learn, but so people stepping out of the mainstream view of, you know, outsourcing everything. You know, if there's something, you know, if you have symptoms, that means there's something wrong with you. You've got whatever it is, you see the doctor, they fix it. So it's unwinding that to say, right, okay, I've got symptoms. What does that mean? So that's a big step as well for people to understand what the symptoms are and to be aware that that isn't necessarily something bad if they experience symptoms. You know, and it's not I've got to run and stop the symptoms, because you're stopping the body's natural processes of clearing itself.
Yeah, exactly.
And Don, I was thinking as you were speaking of that, about some of the things that are popping into people's minds and people are really concerned about, like microplastics. And I've heard that there's studies where they found microplastics in all these tissues in the body, in men's testicles, and it might be contributing to, you know, lowered fertility rates and all these other things. I was wondering, do you have any ideas on pointers or on how to get that stuff out of your system? How do you deal with something like microplastics, or is it as big of a deal as it's being made out to be? What's going on with that from your point of view?
I haven't looked into that in any detail, so I can't really, I don't have a particular answers. At the same time, it's still the same thing of not falling into fear, knowing the body can process it. You know, it will always find ways of clearing whatever it needs to clear. And maybe increasing support of detoxification processes. Although the body's always detoxing. You know, I mean, that's, you know, breath, and you know, the body's, you know, expelling waste all the time. So it's not to fall into a fear, and to become more aware of what products you are using, and to be more careful, more mindful about what you are doing. I like, but I can't say anything. I've got no responses to anything specific for the microplastic. So, yeah, sorry about that.
No, well, I actually want to circle around a bit to something you said earlier about, you know, the testing and you know, this regular testing that we get done. And it reminded me of like pap smears, because I've stopped doing pap smears, and I think that's another trap that people fall into, where when there isn't anything quote unquote wrong with them, we're constantly being poked and prodded by doctors, by the medical system, to find something wrong. And I don't know what it's like in the UK or even the US. I'm not sure if they do it the same. But here in Australia, when you turn 60, you get inaugurated with a stool test kit in the mail so that they can test you for bowel cancer. And it's just like, what a way to initiate people into their elderly years, you know? It's like, we're going to find something wrong with you. And and just because you've had that experience with cancer, I'd love to hear you speak on that, like any insights that you have through your research or just through your own personal experience about how that plays out in terms of, again, how we view our health and feeling like, you know, even when there's not anything presenting, that it's almost like we're conditioned to always be looking for something wrong with us.
That's it. Yes, absolutely. You know, we're trained to be looking for something that's wrong with us all the time, you know, so we must be tested for this, we must go for this checkup. And also part of it is that now there is the aging process, you know, there is obviously, you know, we don't stay as babies, you know, we grow up. There is a process through this, you know, through this life. It doesn't necessarily mean deterioration. There are changes, yes, I mean, we undergo changes, and it's a question of how much we buy into the system about, you know, falling apart as we age, you know, and that's, you know, inverted commas, you know, it's like air quotes around falling apart, and that's part of the, you know, as you get older, you fall apart. Yeah, changes happen, and it's a question of what we want to do about that. But the whole medical system does kind of rely on that fear, rely on that indoctrination that everyone believes that they're falling apart. So they've got to get checked to find out if something, and this is the whole idea of, you know, that there is a disease that gets them, you know, that they get something, or, you know, and it's not, it's something, these symptoms are processes that the body is undergoing, possibly because it's been strained by, you know, exposure to toxins, or it could be, you know, emotional suppression over a whole lifetime, and, you know, that things that happened in the past that just sit there and just are suppressed. You know, it's amazing, all sorts of ideas. You know, people who don't speak about certain things that happened, and they just hold that, and it can cause damage in the body. But the system sending out these tests, oh, you've got to go and test and whatever. I mean, as I say, I stopped. I stopped going for mammograms a long time ago. I stopped going for, and I don't have. I'm not connected to a doctor's practice, so I don't have those kinds of things dropping in my dropping through my letterbox. I know a lot of people do, and it's quite interesting to see various people posting on, you know, things like Facebook or whatever. You know, oh, I got my stupid letter. Yes, it went straight in the bin. So people are aware that they're being encouraged to be tested for something. You know, so when people take responsibility, then that's part of it, to not outsource, to not be tested, just in case. And I understand everyone's on their journey, so if some people still feel uncertain, I'm not going to say, don't if you feel scared. At the same time, think about why you're scared. And that's also the other thing with genetics, which of course Bruce Lipton said, you know, your genes don't control your biology. So these conditions are not genetic, they're not passed on through genes, because it's not, you know, our genes aren't what control our health. So there are so many parts to all these puzzles, and, you know, the fear part is just really what the system plays on. You know, you can see it by all the different stories that keep coming out about, because you're going into your summer, so because here we're going into our winter, so there's a sudden, you know, flu season has hit early, and that's just all nonsense. And, you know, there are reasons that people are, yeah, I know, it's crazy. There are reasons that people are experiencing symptoms. But, you know, it's flu season. It's just, yeah, and it's really advertising for the vaccine industry, because that's all that's in the article. It's like, go and get your vaccine, you know, you must be vaccinated. And, you know, I think there's there's an increased percentage of people who are what they call vaccine hesitant, so they're not going along and having their flu jabs, and so they need to bump up the numbers because the numbers are lower, and it's like, oh, there's a low uptake. Oh, we've got to get more people coming along to get their jabs, and that's why it's the no virus position, or the unproven germ theory position is so important, because then people realise that that they're totally unnecessary, because that's not how the body works.
Yeah, it's really effective marketing, and they started a long time ago. People forget the germ thing wasn't really a big part of the culture until Edward Bernays. I don't know if that was in the 50s or earlier, but they were marketing. And we used to use these little cups, the little I forget the name of the brand, but there's paper cups, and we would have them. But they did it. The marketing was around the public drink fountains. And, the germs could be creeping around on this public drink fountain. Don't drink from that. Drink from these paper cups so that you don't catch the germs. It was just marketing to sell paper cups. That's where the big public awareness was really being drawn. And that was kind of towards the height of as TV became more prominent and all that. Now, they had germs and stuff before, but it was, there was homeopathy a lot more frequently back then. Back in the States, it was contested, but still present. And I don't know the history of homeopathy in the UK, but I'm sure there was a bit going on here in Australia as well. But homeopathy is proven to provide some very powerful solutions for things that have nothing to do with microscopic germs. It's sometimes hard to describe like what would actually be the mechanism that it actually helps you, except that you just see that it works. So it's a belief thing, but it's also there's an element to it that can be tested double blind and with animals and pets and everything else. But the germ thing, it's falling apart so quickly, and I know it's well established, but I'm like, people have their own experiences with it, and they can deny or believe whatever they want. But you said earlier about there being hardly any or no scientific proof that germs are contagion that are passed from person to person. So I wonder if you could expand on that a little bit and just maybe point to where that idea came from, because early on, like that book back in 2010, that's probably the earliest that I've heard people laying out kind of like an in-depth exposure of this. But what kind of keyed you into the idea that germs weren't really causing, so to speak, illness?
Yeah, and I want to know, what do you tell people when you come across them and they go, what? Germs don't cause illness and viruses don't exist. If you have a little spiel, how do you explain that to people?
Well, I start with the burden of proof lies with those who are proposing a theory or making a statement. So, what we've been doing for the last few years is falsifying the statement that germs cause disease, because when you actually go back into the history, and I mean, a lot of people have been talking about the foundational papers, and once you look into it, you realise that what is said within, or what is written within those papers, doesn't actually provide the proof that it's claimed to do. But it's almost like what we call here Chinese whispers, that something was started and it just gets carried on, and it starts becoming something different. But it's not that. It's a very, very useful tool, as you say. Fear of germs means that we can sell you X, Y, Z. So it's more than marketing. It's also a control thing, because it keeps people outsourcing to find. We'll find the germ in me, find the germ, and so tell me what I can do to kill the germ, because the germ is making me ill. Well, that's not about health. That's because anything that you take that kills a germ is harmful, by its nature, because it's supposed to kill the germ, and therefore it's going to harm you somewhere within your body as well. Where does it start? Well, obviously, it seems to have started with Pasteur and that whole idea, but that was latched onto because that seemed to be just for whatever reason, and I don't know how they decided that was the right theory to go with, but they ran with that in the late 19th century, and it was then picked up by the Rockefellers in the early 20th century, and because then they could create these pharmaceuticals from petrochemicals, so they've got the medicines, and then using the experiments that were in these different papers that allegedly showed germs, so I don't say this is proven. It's to say that isn't proven, and so because that hasn't been proven, that isn't an answer. And there were, I suppose really some of the studies were the ones that were conducted during the so-called Spanish flu, 1918 flu. Around that time, there were many different studies where they were trying different ways to just view transmission. So they had healthy people go into these different hospitals where there were men with the condition that now is now called Spanish flu, but at the time it was believed to be bacterial. It wasn't even talked about as a virus back then. So there are all sorts of different experiments where they've tried to demonstrate contagion or transmission, and the healthy men spent loads of time with the ill men, get them to cough in their face. They even had, they took substances from the ill people from their noses and whatever, and put it up the noses of the healthy people, and virtually nothing happened. None of the healthy people became ill as a result of all these different ways that they were trying to demonstrate contagion and transmission. There's also there was the research unit in England. I think it was called the Cold Unit, something like that. Again, if you're aware of Daniel Reuters and his book and Can You Catch a Cold, there are loads of studies in there where they are trying to demonstrate transmission of some description, and they've tried many different ways, and none of them actually the healthy people do not then present the symptoms that are associated with the illnesses that they're supposed to get. So, and when they refer back to even the older studies, the allegedly originating studies of the things like rabies, where they said, proved rabies. And when you look at the experiments, they're just doing some horrendous things to animals and injecting, brain material into them, or injecting material into their brains, and then wonder why they get ill. We go, well, that's not the route of transmission of so-called rabies. So, it's to look at these stories and these reports with an open mind, with curiosity, instead of going, oh, that's what they say, to actually read it carefully and say, that actually doesn't prove what they're saying. And that's quite a lot of what's in What Really Makes You Ill, because it's to show what is being reported in the mainstream and say, well, this is what this is based on. And when you look at what it's based on, you think, actually, that isn't doing that. So it's getting people to see that they're being fooled by the story, by the report from the media. And that's where most people stop. Whereas once you start looking at the alleged evidence, it just isn't there, or it certainly doesn't show what it's claimed to show. And that's really the point, to point out the contradictions and to say that's not what they say. you know. So, I mean, that's a long-winded way. So, but also it depends on who's asking. So, and so to, you know, I try to ask them questions to see where they are and to see what would work. And if they're just belligerent, I don't. You know, I just, well, you know, I know, I know, okay, you know, I'm not going to argue with you. But if they're open, then we'll have a conversation.
Yeah, and I always think with the germ theory thing is that correlation does not equal causation, and I think that's what we're taught is like, oh, the bacteria is there, you're presenting these symptoms, and this bacteria is here, so that's causing it. And I just see it as, well, the bacteria is there because it's doing a job. Like, we know of the gut microbiome, and you know, allegedly we have more bacteria than cells in our body, and we couldn't survive without that bacteria. And so when there is certain bacteria present with certain symptoms, I now see it as, well, the bacteria is there to do a job. You know, whether it becomes overgrown, that's a different story. And yes, I totally acknowledge that things can come out of balance and we can get infections where maybe, you know, there is bacteria or fungus out of balance. But again, it's like, that's a whole paradigm shift for people to go from, well, this bacteria is there, so it's causing the issue, to, oh, this bacteria is there doing a particular job for whatever's presenting.
Absolutely, and different bacteria are in different parts of the body and performing different functions, and you know, they are part of the cleanup crew, as are fungi, and as are what are often called parasites. You know, and they're not parasites; they're there for a reason. That's because the body is in a particular condition. So, I mean, that's the terrain. That, you know, the terrain is so out of balance. They're there to balance the terrain, and people say, well, you know, get rid of the parasites. And one of the things that parasites do is that they absorb heavy metals. So if you're going to kill the parasite, then their body dies and the heavy metals are going back into your body instead of in the parasites to then be removed. So yes, and again, something that's really out of balance, you know, there will be more bacteria, but again, the bacteria are still not the cause. They are doing their job, and they change into different forms according to the environment and according to what process they are actually helping to clean up. And when that becomes overloaded, then there's a move into the fungal form, which is why many people who take antibiotics for a long time can end up having what's called a candida overgrowth, or just candida. That's because the situation hasn't been improved, because, you know, taking antibiotics is killing. They kill bacteria, but the body's becoming more toxic because antibiotics are toxic. And so it's like bringing in the next part of, I don't want to call it an army, but the next group of helpers to say, well, we're not clearing this. We need some bigger helpers, so that, you know, the fungal forms come in, which are the candida. So if people are aware of what's called pleomorphism, I'd suggest they look into that, because, and then when things are restored to, or being restored, the fungal forms will then go, and then the different bacterial forms will go until they then balance out and return to their normal form. So yeah, I mean, it is that, well, bacteria are there, yes, because they're doing a job. It doesn't prove they're the cause, absolutely, and just that correlation. So many people are caught up with that. Thinking that, you know, that they're bacteria. Yeah, bacteria aren't fundamentally bad. That's the thing. Everyone's going, bacteria, oh, bad. You know, no, they're not. They are performing a function, very important one, as you say. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I've heard allegedly the number of bacteria in your gut is, I don't know how this is possible, but I've heard that it exceeds the number of cells in your own body. Maybe they're just super, super tiny, but whether that's true or not, just the idea that you have so much that's in your gut that's so incredibly important for your survival, and the regularity that people take antibiotics, without thinking about it, usually orally. So it ends up in the gut. And, I'm just like, that's like the first step. I remember, I'll never forget this one phrase. I think it was Barbara O'Neill, but it was step one is stop poisoning yourself. If you want to get healthy, whatever you're doing that's poisoning you, try to identify it and stop doing that first, and now we're starting to unroll, like, what does it mean to poison yourself? And, externally, the idea that one, you need to understand there's more to it than just what's commonly known. And it just kind of reminds me of when I look at the forest, I see trees, I see bark, I see things growing off of it. I see a hole in the ground where a snake just went in. Like I look deeply at something. And when I was in the Army, and I grew up out in the country, when I was in the Army, we did land navigation in the woods by ourselves at night. And the guys that were lived in the cities their whole lives didn't have that depth of peering into the forest. When they look at the forest, they see trees and they kind of get overwhelmed and get freaked out. If they see something move, they're ready to run the opposite direction. It's very silly when you see that when a guy with a machine gun is like going like this because something's scattered in the bushes. And I was like, that's just the difference, is looking deeply, like what is actually there. And when you train your eyes to see it, you can spot stuff so quickly, a little, a bird there, a snake over there. And you just kind of are more aware or more situationally aware. And the same thing with the body. There's depth to these things, and it's worth exploring and looking into. You don't have to know everything. You'll never know everything. But just knowing that there's more depth to this and there's more meaning to it than just a cursory glance will tell you. So things like the polymorphism, or is it pleomorphism? Where would somebody go to just begin to learn about that?
Well, I mean, if anyone did a sort of normal search, they'd probably find some of the more critical, because most of these search engines will take you to the wrong place. One of my podcast episodes was with Dr. Marisol Arce, whose book Germs Are Not Our Enemy. She talks about that within her book. She's also got a Substack. It's not looking for the mainstream explanations, because they're not keen on people understanding pleomorphism, which for good reason, because then we'd realise what's actually going on in our bodies. And the other point that you made is so good, that the people who aren't used to being in nature. I mean, that's one of the things, that we're being disconnected from nature, and so we don't, and indoctrinated to see nature as being, if you like, our enemy. So which I think could be part of sort of what they're doing now to keep us out of nature, and scared of animals because they can spread disease. Again, this is all another reason why I'm just, keep telling people about, the problems with the germ theory, because it's, the idea that we can catch diseases from animals, which is just not the case. The reason animals have health problems is because of how they're treated or what's going on in their environment. Even wild animals, because they could be sprayed, or something spraying on stuff going on, or they could be trying to kill mosquitoes or something, so they're using toxins in the area, so that will affect the wildlife in that area. So again, it's and as you say, it is learning to see things differently, to come out of that very narrow view, and this is all part of it. And absolutely nobody can know everything, and be curious to keep looking at. Okay, another question comes up and go, okay, I wonder, be curious, and not because we're expected to, or we expect to know, to find the answer, and it's to say, well, maybe not. There are a lot of things we don't know, and it's okay to say I don't know, because it's like, what do you mean you don't know? No, I don't.
I agree with all that.
Yeah, yeah. Before we wrap up, Dawn, I really want to touch on this because I know actually it was the most recent thing I watched of yours. I think you were on the Living Free Movement platform was where I saw it, but I had seen you popping up a few places talking about assisted dying. And the reason I actually want to bring it up is because just over the weekend we were talking to someone that was telling a story about a family member who went through the process of assisted dying here in Australia, in Victoria. And I didn't even think that it was legal here, but apparently in Victoria it is. And I was actually a little bit shocked, to be honest, but I know that this is something that you've kind of been delving into recently. So I'd love to hear your take on this becoming more prevalent. Now it seems to be, I remember years ago seeing it it must have been years ago because it was when I still watched TV, on a news program talking about, it was in some like the Netherlands region, where it was like the first place in the world, I think, that it was legal. And, they did this whole story on, how people should have choice. And I remember even back then I agreed with this a long time ago. And now I have very different views on it. And it's not about judging people for those choices, but again, it's about this system that is making these things available. There's something about it that feels quite nefarious to me, but I'd love to know like what you've sort of looked into and what you're finding in this area.
Wow, it's a huge topic. There are parts of it that you can say, well, yes, about choices. My perspective is, I think people should have informed choices. And one of my concerns is that it's offered to people who, well, that's the starting point. It's moving in a different direction, but the starting point is it is to be offered to people who are, and air quotes, terminally ill. And that's my starting point, was what do they mean by terminally ill? And they often mean, people with cancer. And knowing what I know about cancer, and also about the nocebo effect, that terminal diagnosis or prognosis can actually cause that person's life to end, because there are many people who have died pretty much according to the prognosis. Sorry, whatever, sorry, Mr. Smith, you've only got 3 months, and 3 months later the guy's dead. Now there are other people who receive a prognosis that, and they say, instead of saying, yes, okay, doctor, they'll say, no, thank you. And they go and they live for years and they're fine. So because I know the nocebo effect, that was one of the things that rings bells for me, that it's the medical system does not know when a person's going to die. And at the same time, they are contributing to that possibility that that's what's going to happen by saying it. The other thing is they say, yes, but we're right. Well, yes, you are right, because of the way we work, the way humans work, that they can take on that prognosis and fulfill it, and many times people, there are, off the top of my head, can't think where, where there've been autopsies of people who are alleged to have died from so-called cancer, and the autopsy has shown insufficient pathology to warrant that person having died at that stage, but they died in their time limit. So because of my research, this is my main concern. Now that was my main concern because of it being discussed here in England. Well, it's not the whole of the UK, it's only England and Wales. Scotland's got a different system, and Ireland's doing something different as well. So I was looking into that. I know it's started quite early in Canada, I think it's 2016, and they're now moving into offering it to people who are, it's no longer about people who are terminally ill. It's being offered as an option for almost anybody, and it's being brought into for people with so-called mental illnesses. But again, because of these labels, and this is my problem with it, and my concern, and my efforts to help people learn more about how the body actually works, what these labels are, what's going on, so that they and their family and everything can make informed decisions. And now that's not to say some people aren't, there won't be people who are literally, dying because their bodies are beyond the point at which they can return. At the same time, I would still point to the example, a case, if you've heard of Vinita Muljani, who was basically, about to die. And she had what's called a near-death experience. And when she returned from that particular experience, her body healed. Now, I mean, she was literally on the verge of dying. And she, as I say, came back. I mean, again, if people want to look into that, she's still alive. She's talking about it. She recovered from, as I say, that would have been, she would have been regarded as terminal, having a terminal illness. I mean, she literally was, on the verge of dying, and she's still alive. She's come back. Her body's healed because whatever it was that she experienced in that near-death experience changed something in her life, in her body. It was not just physical. It was, more spiritual as well. So she came back and is, alive and well and thriving. So again, my concerns about what these prognosis and what we are told by these external sources. So, I mean, that's my main concern. I mean, it's a huge subject, but that I think is the kind of key point of where I thought, no, I've got to write about this.
Well, I'm glad you stepped up and said something. And I'll point out to anybody, if anybody's concerned that they might take away your right to medically assisted suicide, don't worry. The program is worldwide at this point. It's called the COVID vaccine. So the boosters, line on up. It's like a roulette. It's like a game show. So, but not to make too much of a light of it, but it's like that.
Well, I like that you put it that way, because it is medically assisted suicide at this point. It's not, oh, we're just, it's very different to, like I said, when I had first heard of it, this was probably like 15, 20 years ago, maybe, when I first saw it, they did some news thing on it. And it was for someone who was like basically bedridden, in hospital, like I think it was cancer or something. And they were just like a vegetable. And of course, that's how they sell it too, because when they introduce these things, it's like, look, we're doing this person a service, really, because we're putting them out of their misery. But to be offering that to people with mental health illness is so unethical. And there's so many problems with that, because having been like someone that experienced quite severe depression for many years, like if you had asked me at one point if I wanted to be assisted in dying, I would have said yes. And do I feel that way now? No. Do people that suffer with mental health illnesses feel that way forever? No. There's so many issues with that now. The way that it's kind of being opened up to, like you said, pretty much everyone now.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as you say, there's so much to be said about where that's going, and but everyone's on a different journey. So as I say, I'm not saying there shouldn't be options. I'm all for options. So I'm not saying yes or no. I'm urging awareness and understanding, and just like all these issues, they're not black and white. There are nuances, and I would never say, and it's not even for me to tell other people what to do anyway. So I think people should. So again, people can make their own choices, and it's not for the system to impose something on people. So I'm all for freedom.
Disclose, give them proper disclosure. Yeah.
And the drugs they use don't actually kill them. That they put them into a very deep sort of sedation. And again, that leads into the whole thing of what brain death is, and that's a whole other topic. I mean, there's so much to all of that. That's a whole other conversation itself.
Yeah, because I would wager that there's probably some selling of organs going on with that. So
That's the point, and that's where the really horrible stuff that I was just horrified when I discovered that in fact when they harvest organs, they need to be not that the person should not be dead as such. They're classed as brain dead, and that's the point at which the organs are harvested, but they are not. That is not actual death, because if there's a story, I can't remember the guy, of somebody who was declared brain dead and they were about to start harvesting the organs, and somebody was with him and didn't think he was dead, and somehow, I don't know, prodded him, not whatever, and the guy kind of came to, and he'd been called brain dead. So brain death is not death. There's also, his name escapes me, Paul, I think it's Dr. Paul Byrne, Byrne. I think he's been talking about this, that brain death isn't death. So, there's so many parts to all of this. And yeah, and it is, harvesting organs, absolutely.
It's insane. And it's just like that. What was that experiment? It was a study in Stanford or one of these places where they had, someone of an authority figure in a lab coat directing someone to essentially hit a button and electrocute somebody else.
Yeah, Milgram experiments, yes. I've looked into those.
They're just telling you how the medical system works. Yeah. Yeah, because you're doing harm to somebody. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
No,
yeah.
No, they were seeing, the response to authority. And I've looked into that, and it's very interesting. At the same time, a lot of people did, and yet other people didn't. So, it shows that we're all different. Not everyone, obeys authority. And also, a psychotherapist looked into some of those studies, followed up and found Stanley Milgram's widow, and discovered that many people who'd been part of the experiments had written to him afterwards to say that having taken part in those experiments changed their whole perspective on life, and it made them it helped them to do things differently. So even though they kind of followed authority then, it made them change it made them think about it, and it made them change how they view things and do things differently. So, not necessarily all bad, and it means that people can change. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
That's a silver lining I wasn't expecting. Appreciate that.
And it just goes to show that this is all, the programming and the indoctrination, it's all at a subconscious level. So if we're not consciously aware of it, we'll just play whatever it is out. And I think that goes to show, that speaks volumes about what happens when things are brought into our conscious awareness and we have a greater capacity for what we want to choose.
Absolutely. And that's the point. It's just because we did something that way in the past, we can learn. And in a way, that's also what the whole COVID psyop was about, is getting a lot of people to think differently, to see things differently, and to start shifting where they are, and to bring a lot of the subconscious stuff up to the conscious, and start making some maybe different decisions, looking at things in a somewhat different way, and having that, oh, hang on a minute, no, I'm not going to do that. Oh, why? To ask questions and look at things differently, to have a different perspective. And that's where we are now, moving into different ways and opening up, like we were saying before, about the whole energetic side of things, looking into things in a different way that we may not have done in quite such large numbers without that. So, again, silver lining to the COVID psyop. So, I am a somewhat of an eternal optimist. At the same time, recognizing that there's that's not denying what's going on. It's always that balance of seeing what's going on and learning to what I can do and how to do and where to go with it all. So yeah, it's always a balance.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, eternal optimist, because that's what I was just about to say is I love that your message is so positive. And I think it is just about people being better well informed, and not just by taking in more information from the external, but being better informed by their own bodies, by their own intuition. And thank you so much for the work that you do as well. I feel like you're way ahead of the game, especially with, writing that book and it coming out right before COVID hit. It was, very timely. So how can people stay in touch with you and what you're currently working on now, and get your books and all the things?
Well, the book really is from Amazon. I mean, there are some other online stores that probably people can get it from. So that's what really makes you ill. The work I'm doing now is mainly on Substack. There's there's well over 100 articles I've written now in the past over 3 years now. And I recently started a podcast earlier this year, which is fun, having conversations. It's like, I have this conversation with this person. It's called Dawn of Discernment, and it is, helping, sharing conversations of things that help people discern somewhat, instead of just following the mainstream view, and to recognise that, we discern for ourselves as well, as you say. It's from within us and what we do. So that's on Substack. So that's dawnlester.substack.com. It's my article. It's called Dawn's Writings. As I say, the podcast is Dawn of Discernment, which is also on some of the podcast channels, the Apple and Spotify, those things. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram, but I mean, really, Substack's the main place where people can find my work, and it's possible to connect with me there as well. So thank you.
Yeah. You're very welcome. Yeah, it was a pleasure having you on, Dawn, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of the people you've interviewed on there. Sounds interesting. So thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and Natural Art Form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies that help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform. We're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.